Working with a model can be a little stressful at times. Maybe you've never worked with them before, maybe you're not sure how to pose them. What if you don't get a good shot? You know, there's a lot of things that go into thinking when you're first working with a model. This video, we're gonna go over a few tips and tricks on how to do that. So let me go get my gear and we'll get started.
Hey there, my name is Michaela Arrington and welcome to Exploring Photography. So right now, Will is currently getting his gear, so I wanted to steal his intro. And today we're gonna be showing you a video on how to pose and model for photography.
That's my intro.
Yeah?
You're not supposed to steal my intro.
But I'm here.
Fine. Well, since she's already done the intro, what she said, we're gonna be going over tips and tricks on how to work and pose with a model. Now, the first tip is get to know them. When you're first working with a model, if it's someone you've never worked before, get to know them, do proper introductions, learn likes and dislikes. It kind of breaks the ice and makes it a lot more familiar and a more comfortable shoot. That way it's not really awkward when you're shooting because sometimes it can be a little awkward when you have a camera and you're just clicking away on a model that you don't really have too much introduction with. The second tip is to be upfront about the shoot. When you're coordinating with a model, tell them what the shoot is actually for. For example, if I was doing an outside shoot with her and she showed up and I was like, by the way, here's this skimpy lingerie I want you to put on, it might be a little awkward and it probably wouldn't go over so well. So the next step before we start shooting is a very key point. When you're on set, you want to work with your model. Now, this goes both ways. As a model, you want to work with your photographer. As a photographer, you want to work with your model. If the photographer knows best or knows exactly what he's doing, it's not going to flow well with the model. And same with the model. If the model knows all of her best poses and knows exactly what she wants and doesn't work with the photographer, it's going to clash. So the best way to do it is to work with each other. Sometimes the photographer might have a style that the model's not familiar with, so it's important to then direct the model, but still be willing to accept a back and forth. So why don't you go ahead and sit over here? And we're gonna get shooting. One thing to keep in mind when you're shooting is always be talking to the model, whether it's direction or simple encouragement. Because if you go too long and it's super quiet, the model can get a little tense and sometimes it can get awkward. The difference between a professional and a new model is a professional will know poses and will know their best looks and their best sides and things like that. However, that doesn't mean you shouldn't give direction. It's all in how you give direction. Whether new or professional, it's really important to build on direction. And what I mean by that, if you tell a model, stand there, put your hands on your hips, put your leg out, bend your knee, put your shoulders back and raise your chin, it can get a little fumbly and look a little awkward. It's too much. Build your direction. So have them put their hands on their hips and then put their leg out, take a picture, and then bend their knee, take a picture. Shoulders back, take a picture. Chin down, take a picture. Give them time to build and you'll find new poses that way. So it's a super important tip and one that makes shooting much easier. For a super easy posing method, I've come up with an acronym, CHESS. It's simply cross one foot over the other, raise your opposite hip, elbow back, shoulders back, and that creates the natural S curve. So whenever you're posing, if you need a good pose, think chess. That about wraps up how to shoot inside or in a studio setup. Gives you some tips to start with and then build from. So now let's move outside and give some tips on how to shoot portraiture outside or in harsh light, things like that. Welcome to the great outdoors where we're just in a backyard. Anyways, so we're outside here. I'm gonna give you some quick tips. One of the tips is when you're shooting in harsh light, you wanna put the model where the sun is behind her. It kind of gives a nice backlight glow and it takes that harsh light off of her face. Or find some shade. Preferably find some shade. It just makes it a lot softer light and easier shooting. Another tip, when you're shooting a model and you're getting really close, I forgot to mention this in the studio part, but when you're shooting really close, make sure she relaxes her jaw. And one of the easiest ways to do this is to tell them to open their mouth slightly to just a point where showing some teeth. It allows them to relax the jaw and doesn't give that tense look that it takes away from that model feature. A really important thing when you're shooting, either in the studio or outside, is to fill the frame because you want to get rid of that negative space. What I mean by negative space is when you're shooting a portrait and you have this really big open area that doesn't have any purpose in the image. If you fill it with, say, a foreground element or something like that, it makes a much nicer portrait shot. Also, you can get low, you can move behind things, you can actually move your body rather than shooting eye to eye, because it creates a more unique and a more interesting style. So that's a really important thing to think with when you're shooting portraiture. Change your body position, change your location, change your foreground, and just play with all of those different things. A question I get a lot is, what lens should I use when doing portraiture? I generally use either a 50 or higher millimeter range. Generally, I like to stick with an 85 to 100 because I find that it shapes the face nicely. Also, I usually work with a very small f-stop or wide aperture in this case, like a 1.2, 1.4, 2.8. Whatever your lens can go lowest, it'll create that really shallow depth of field and that beautiful bokeh in the background. However, when you're shooting at a low f-stop, you have to remember that your focus has to be pinpoint. Focus on the eye. When someone looks at a picture, your attention naturally goes to the eye of the photo. So if your eye is not sharp, it can ruin the whole image. If your eye is sharp, even if the other parts of the image are slightly blurry, it can make the entire photo work great. So that wraps up some basic tips for you to get out there and just start shooting models. I hope this really helps, because portraiture is a lot of fun and you can get really creative with it. If you have any other questions, you can comment below and I get back to almost every single comment there is. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always,
don't forget to enjoy the journey that is exploring photography.
And it's chess. Chi-E-S.
Is it filming? Oh yeah, it is. So to help you, we've come up with an acronym. Child's pose. Nope, that's yoga.
Model pose.
Okay, it's very hot in here. Okay.
Lenses that he typically uses a 50mm and an 85. Those are perfect for portraiture.
He makes it seem so easy, but then if you put him in front of a video of his own making.
That is so accurate.